Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I've always wanted to make video responses to Sam Harris' absurd arguments, and recently I felt like I wanted to make videos about what's happening in Gaza and the crimes of the IDF and the Israeli government. Thanks to Sam Harris, he made it easier for me to do both at the same time, because I realized recently that Sam is making, videos about what's happening in Palestine, in Gaza specifically, and it seems like he's throwing some crazy, very crazy and absurd arguments about this conflict.
Of course, Israel has made some terrible mistakes in Gaza, and the recent killing of aid workers is the latest example. But this is the kind of thing that happens in every war. There are always friendly fire incidents where the good guys wind up killing their own soldiers, to say nothing of innocent non-combatants. Every conflict the U.S. has been in has produced horrors of this kind. We bombed weddings and funerals in Iraq and Afghanistan. Remember Pat Tillman? We killed our own celebrity football player. Killing anyone but the bad guys amounts to an act of spectacular self-harm.
Well, first of all, this is an absurd analogy, a very stupid analogy, and I'll explain why in a moment, but let's pretend for now that this analogy is good and it makes sense. Let's talk about wars elsewhere. Civilians get killed whenever there is a war between two countries. That's inevitable, and in the case of Israel is trying to get Hamas, but in the process, civilians get killed. If you follow this reasoning, even Hamas leaders could come and say, you know what, that's the dark side of resistance. If you go through every resisting group that was resisting occupation, a foreign occupation in their land, it's inevitable that they will resort to some form of terrorism. Well, they don't have the capabilities of targeting only military combatants, so what they do is they try to make the most damage, the most harm on civilians. Many, resisting groups throughout history behaved in this way. Would Sam Harris then say, well, yeah, since, Hamas is just behaving like what every other resisting group in this world would behave, therefore I accept that what Hamas did on October 7th was a legitimate form of resistance? Because atrocities do happen during resistance, right? So the first point is, Sam's stupid argument could be used to legitimize the, event on October 7th. Let's now talk about the analogy itself, which is this is a war, and let's compare it to the war in Iraq and wars elsewhere. And, if you compare it, you'll find that Israel is just doing the same thing. People behave in this manner in wars, and atrocities do happen in wars. Well, first of all, calling this a war is absolutely ridiculous. Only foolish people would call what's happening in Gaza as a war. Because, where is the army of Gaza? Where are the tanks? Where are the aeroplanes? Gaza is just a small piece of land in which, some militant group in there, just thousands hiding here and there, just like other militant groups behave. You can't compare this to wars between two different armies, even if they were, of different level of power. This is not even a war. Hamas and their militant groups are hiding, and Israel is trying to get them. And by the way, even before this conflict started, Hamas, leaders, Hamas militant fighters, they were hiding also. They were always hiding. Because why? Because Israel is controlling Gaza. Israel is controlling the space, the air, the sea of Gaza. So Gaza is technically occupied by Israel. When an occupying force is trying to get some militant group in the land that they have occupied, you can't call this a war. However, if you are struggling to find a good analogy, I'll give you this. Imagine that the same atrocities that took place on the 7th of October happened in the West Bank. In the West Bank, turned out that there are so many Hamas militant fighters in the West Bank. Now Israel wants to get them. Do you think that Israel will behave in the same way that they are doing in Gaza? That they will flatten the West Bank? That they will bomb hospitals, supermarkets, they will bomb schools. Do you think that will happen? No. Why? The answer is very clear. Because Israel cares about the lives of its citizens. They will still fight Hamas. They will still try to get Hamas, but in a different way. So there are different ways of getting Hamas. There are different ways of attacking Hamas. I thought there's only one way, which is to bomb the hell out of the place where Hamas exists, like they did in Gaza, right? But now because it's in Israel now, and because Israeli civilians are going to get harmed, now there will be another way to do it.
They're fighting an urban war against a terrorist regime that is doing everything within its power to maximize the loss of civilian life on its own side. Okay, the lengths to which Hamas has gone to ensure civilian casualties is unprecedented, again, on its own side. Linger over this detail for a second. This gets my vote for the most perverse behavior in human history. No one else does this. Using your own people as human shields, relying on the fact that your enemy will care more about the lives of your own children than you do?
Look, I'm very happy that these unintelligent arguments are coming from Sam Harris, because for a long time these ex-Muslims and those atheists tried to present Sam Harris as some sort of intellectual and intelligent guy, and here he is making these ridiculous arguments. Because going back to your initial point, which is, look, let's compare the war in Gaza with the war elsewhere, and it's you'll find out that Israel is just doing the same. Let's compare resisting groups which resist occupation anywhere in this world. If you have an occupier occupying your land, and then in that land some resisting group arises, I've never heard of any resisting group who would go out and say publicly, here we are resisting you, an occupier, come and get us. Of course they would be hiding. Of course they would be hiding. And again, I'll have to emphasize on this point, whether you agree or disagree with Hamas is beside the point. Even if a Zionist, an Israeli, soldier is listening to me, that he should agree with me that Sam's points are ridiculous. Because, throughout history, resisting group hide. That doesn't mean that they are using their, civilian population as human shields. Now let's think about it this way. Imagine Palestine are occupying Israel, for example, or what is called Israeli lands. Imagine that Palestine now is occupying Israel, and now some Israelis want to resist. Do you believe that they will come out and say, look, we are here, come and get us? This is a very childish argument, seriously. But believe me, since Sam decided to be pro-Israel, you will find lots of stupid arguments like this, inshallah. And we'll respond to them in time. Thank you so much for watching. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.